So let's begin, and people will be joining us, I'm sure, in the next few minutes, but we'll begin now. So welcome to this special webinar, The Current Negotiations in the Middle East and Its Implications, featuring U.S. Congressman Brian Mast in conversation with Jennifer Sutton, Executive Director of the Council for a Secure America, followed by a very distinguished panel of experts. I am Dr. Stephen Sussman, Professor of Public Administration in the Andreas School of Business and Public Administration at Barry University in Miami, and co-founder of the Palm Beach Center for Democracy and Policy Research. Dr. Luis Fleischman and I established the center with a dedicated group of colleagues to create a genuine marketplace of ideas. The center is a nonpartisan public policy organization that brings together scholars, experts, public officials, and community stakeholders to examine important local, national, and international challenges. Our work is guided by three core values: diversity, balance, and community. We welcome different perspectives, encourage respectful debate, and provide a forum where civil dialogue and the thoughtful exchange of ideas take precedence over partisan politics and ideological division. Our work, please visit us at palmbeachdemocracy.org, where you can view our previous webinars and read the many articles we have published. The center is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our programs are made possible through the generosity of our supporters, and donations may be made through our website. Thank you for joining us. We are pleased to have you with us for today's program. It is now my pleasure to turn the program over to my colleague, Dr. Luis Fleischman, who will formally introduce Congressman Brian Mast and our moderator, Jennifer Sutton. Luis, you're up.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Today we have a very special treat. We have Congressman Brian Mast, who is, I would say, one of the key people when it comes to American foreign policy in the country, followed by a very interesting panel of analysts. Now, before I introduce the congressman and our moderator, I would like to thank Sarah Connor. She's the staff director of the Subcommittee on the Middle East and North Africa at the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and Shelley Bailish. She's the congressman's scheduler. And I also want special thanks to Jennifer Sutton, our moderator tonight, that I will introduce in a few minutes. First, I would like to introduce Congressman Brian Mast. Congressman Brian Mast has represented the Florida's 21st Congressional District, which is mostly takes the northern part of Palm Beach County and Martin County and part of San Lucie County, in the House of Representatives, 21st Congressional District, since 2017. I remember meeting the congressman when he campaigned for Congress, and I hosted him before his election and afterwards in my previous job at the Jewish Federation. He's a Republican, and he currently serves as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he focuses on national security, foreign policy, and America's strategic interest abroad. This is why I previously mentioned that he's probably one of the most important people is in the country on these issues, foreign policy and security policy. Before entering politics, Mast served for more than 12 years in the U.S. Army, including as an explosive ordnance disposal technician attached to Special Operation Forces in Afghanistan. In 2010, he was critically wounded by an improvised explosive device, losing both legs while clearing a route for fellow soldiers. For his service and heroism, he received numerous military honors, including the Bronze Star Medal, the Purple Heart, the Army Commendation Medal of Valor, and the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. He lives in Fort Pierce, Florida. He is married to Brianna, and they have 4 children. Congressman Mast, it's really an honor to have you here this morning. Before Congressman Mast speaks, I would like to introduce our moderator, Jennifer Sutton. She's the Executive Director of the Council for a Secure America, where she focuses on the intersection of U.S. energy security, foreign policy, and U.S.-Israel relationship. Previously, she served at the Israeli Embassy in Washington as Director of External Relations and Social Secretary to Ambassador Michael Oren. She holds degrees from Washington and Lee University and Johns Hopkins University, and is a frequent commentator on energy and Middle East policy issues. Over the past decade, Jennifer has briefed elected officials, senior government officials, and industry executives in Washington, D.C., in different state capitals in the country and in international forums. She has moderated high-level policy discussions, hosted prominent leaders and decision makers, and led delegations to energy-producing regions across the United States and the Middle East. Jennifer holds a BA in politics from Washington and Lee University and an MA in government from Johns Hopkins University. She was born and raised in New York and is proficient in French and Hebrew, of course, besides English. Without further ado, Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Luis. And of course, thank you to everyone for being here today. Mr. Chairman, it's a real honor to have you. And before I dive into Q&A, I would welcome some remarks from you. And then, of course, we can dive right into it. I know it's a very timely moment to be having this conversation in light of very fluid events in the Middle East and around the world. So I'll turn the chair over to you for brief remarks. And then, of course, we'll jump right into Q&A.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's just maybe start with an overview of U.S. foreign policy and say, the way I would capture an overview of U.S. foreign policy would be to disrupt anything that has been disrupting the United States of America. And you could take that to a host of different fronts. I think the most prevalent place to speak about that right now is Iran. I could speak certainly going back all the way to the barracks bombing in Beirut, but just to speak for the last couple of years, just to speak for the months prior to the recent Operation Epic Fury ever beginning. In the 30 months prior to Epic Fury ever beginning, there were 4 U.S. service members killed, over 350 attacks against the United States of America through the Strait or in the Gulf, throughout that area. Some of them on land, ballistic missile attacks in Syria, Iraq, things like that. And over 200 wounded. That was just the 30 months prior to Epic Fury ever beginning. It was the norm. It was, and what we're doing is we are disrupting what has been disrupting the United States of America for 47 years, certainly not going to allow them to have a nuclear weapon. That doesn't even count what was done, in Israel, their support of their proxies, everything done on October 7th. What I laid out with that, those attacks, they go to any country that's transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. That was the normal, their disruption. This comes to an end. We are not going to be a country that is in a forever war where we are getting hit for 47 years and not hitting back. We're not going to pretend as though, we're like a domestic violence victim that, is walking around with a black eye and saying, we ran into a wall or something like that, pretending, that it's something that it's not. No, we are getting hit and we're not going to go on any longer getting hit and not responding to that. You could say the same thing about Venezuela. You had, drugs going through Venezuela and other places throughout South and Latin America. And, even to the point that you had bounties on the head of people like Nicolas Maduro for, $25 million, $50 million at different times, respectively. That disruption that they're bringing to the shores of the United States of America is not going to go unanswered. It's going to be disrupted. The disruption that has been Cuba is not going to go unanswered, where what they offer, basically the only thing that they offer today, is that they are a strategic high ground to observe and look at and harass the United States of America. that will be disrupted. That's not going to take place. What was going on our southern border, affecting the United States of America, disrupting the United States of America with the illegal immigration that was taking place there, that is going to be disruptive. So that is what you see going on with foreign policy on every front, which is if there is a space, a country, an entity, a foreign terrorist organization, a drug cartel, or whatever it is, if they are disrupting the United States of America, we are going to disrupt them. And that is in turn disruptive as well. But that is what is taking place. And, so to use that as an overview, I'm happy to answer questions on any of this.
Perfect. We're going to pivot around the world, so we'll take it from there. So first off, Mr. Chairman, it's as Luis mentioned in his introduction, it's really, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge your extraordinary military service. And thank you so much for serving our country, for serving the U.S.-Israel relationship, and serving all of us here. How has this shaped the way that you assess today's conflicts in the Middle East?
Give you some, I've said this to many people. This is the way that I address chairmanship of the Foreign Affairs Committee, which primarily deals with soft power. As far as oversight, right? I deal with the State Department. The State Department is soft power. It's USAID. It's diplomats. It's not the Department of War in the same way. And so when I look at what I've witnessed around the globe and where I want U.S. influence, I ask myself, number one, are we influencing? Who is it that we have to influence? And so that means asking three questions that the United States has done a terrible job of asking and really making sure that we're answering to the point of being tactically wise in our soft power. So I asked number one, because I am a representative of the U.S., chairman of the United States Foreign Affairs Committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. What does the United States of America need from a country or a region or an entity that we're dealing with? That's my first question. What is it that we actually need? Why are we involved there? What do we need from this transaction, this engagement? Number two, I ask, what does that country or that region or that entity, that whatever, what is it that they actually want from the United States of America? Because we have been guilty, certainly in the previous years, of providing stuff that they were not looking for at all. I'm not going to go into 100 examples, but there was no country looking for us to give them transgender job fairs, transgender drag shows, operas, plays, musicals, or anything else. But the State Department was providing that across the globe with your tax dollars. That wasn't meeting the moment of providing what countries were looking for from us in terms of an aid, a transaction, or something else. And then the third question is, if we provide what a country is looking for, do we get what we need to make us a stronger United States of America? Maybe that, and I don't just mean that's a transaction of a currency for a weapon. It can be that. Sometimes it is that. But do we get the strategic high ground that we need, the access to the port, the mineral out of the ground that we need, the refinement of the mineral in a place that we need to put into our supply chain for whatever it might be, from high tech to weapon systems to magnets and batteries that go inside of our automobiles here domestically? Do we have, are we getting the peace or the stability or something that we need in the region? What is that? And that's how my service influences that. Are we asking the right questions to make our country the strongest that it can be, to affect all of my fellow service members that are around the globe, whether they're in embassies, whether they're forward deployed to a combat zone? Are we getting everything that we need to make us the strongest possible United States of America through the soft power that I deal with, the State Department? What is it that we need? What is it that they want? And if we provide what they want, do we get what we need? Because if we don't, then we got to sit back down at the table and have the right conversation.
How do you convey that, sir, to some of your colleagues who have not had the privilege of serving our country yet in a military capacity? Obviously, they're serving in a government capacity. What do they misunderstand sometimes about the conditions on the ground when making those decisions?
I'm going to say this goes well beyond members that haven't served in the military. I was in a debate last night on the floor of the House of Representatives about war powers. All right. Now, when I say war powers, you might think, oh, are we authorizing or not authorizing the U.S. military to be engaged in Iran, things like this. So I have had to argue against almost the exact same bill. It's known as a privileged resolution. It has to be given time on the floor for debate. Probably 8 to 10 times I've had to do this during the window of epic fury. And this statement reads, this bill, this resolution by my counterparts on the other side of the aisle, I'm a Republican. This comes from my Democrat counterparts. They say, remove all U.S. forces from hostilities in or with Iran, right? And that's what the resolution will say. No respect for the fact that there are Marines in embassies. So you want us to remove our Marines from our embassies in Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Oman, take your pick of places. Israel, you want us to remove that, and that would be U.S. forces, that are in that CENTCOM area. No respect for the fact that it is our U.S. tactical high altitude area defense systems or our Patriot batteries or whatever that are knocking these ordnance out of the sky that are going to all of the countries that I just listed off and have been. So no respect for that's what's protecting in large part our allies and our citizens of the United States of America, of which the largest population of U.S. citizenry outside of the U.S. is, of course, in Israel. So no respect for that's what's taking place. No respect for the fact of what I listed off to you in my opening remarks, that prior to Epic Fury ever beginning, in the 30 months prior to it beginning, there were over 350 attacks, 4 killed, 4 U.S. service members killed, over 200 wounded. And they want to come and they want to argue and say, there's no imminent threat against the United States of America. There has never been an imminent threat against the United States of America. Whether you served in the military or not, you have half of 1/3 of our government that is literally ignoring what has factually taken place because it doesn't fit a political narrative for them. That is irresponsible to their role in national security. And so that cuts well beyond whether somebody served in the military or not, because it's people that quite literally served in the military. I'll make one more point on this, just to say how political and how partisan this is. It's not my goal to be hyper partisan with you all, but this is the facts of the facts. At the end of the previous administration, at the end of the Biden administration, there was a resolution that came to the floor. Almost everybody voted yes on it. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, almost everybody voted yes. It said, use any and all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Almost every Republican and Democrat voted yes. All of those, and I say this, in totality, Democrats that voted yes when it was Joe Biden to say, Joe Biden, use any and all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, now come to the floor and say there is no nuclear threat. There never was a nuclear threat. They were not on the cusp of, you can watch the videos. We're not on the cusp of obtaining a nuclear weapon. These are just patently false statements that they are making, and totally ignore that they said use any and all means to do this. Why? Because it's total politics.
And sir, do you think that the goalposts have changed in the sense that there are ongoing and evolving situations with Iran? Do you believe negotiations have a realistic chance of producing an enforceable agreement that is going to work for U.S. interests?
Yes, no, I answer what I've said about this since the Memorandum of Understanding that was introduced. The MOU is, as the president, as Secretary Rubio, others have explained, it is a framework. The Memorandum of Understanding with Iran was not a deal. It was a framework to speak about a number of different things, from their pursuit of a nuclear weapon to what was going on with their enriched uranium in places like Fordow, Natanz, Isfahan, other places, to the Strait of Hormuz, international waters, attacks with ballistic missiles, drones, you name it, all of these things. It was about all of that, and their own waterways imports. So I have absolutely no trust, faith whatsoever in Iran to be truthful. And people always like to say, oh, Iran they're these great negotiators. And I think they're moronic negotiators. Personally, if they were great negotiators, they're a large country that has a wealth of minerals that would be one of the wealthiest countries throughout the Middle East. But instead, they don't have 2 pennies to rub together, inflation that's beyond 1,000%, and can't provide basic needs to their people. That's not great negotiators to me. They're just people that are so committed to a radical ideology that they will get in their way on every front. They had an opportunity with the Memorandum of Understanding. There was reasons to be optimistic that we were presenting the opportunity to say, move away from nukes, ballistic missile programs, terror proxies, all of these things, freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. They didn't take that opportunity and they resumed the fight. They proved to be what I assumed they would be, but what they were given the chance to move away from. So, yes, opportunity for diplomacy and negotiation. I would, speak for the president in this round. The president never, I don't think he has any track record whatsoever of closing the door on negotiations, ever. Whether it's Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, Russia, anywhere that you can name, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda, take your pick of conflicts around the globe. India, Pakistan, never closes the door on negotiation, but Iran is not looking to take that.
So with that in mind, can Iran's nuclear program ever be fully dismantled under the current Iranian regime? And how does that look for the United States? Are we looking towards boots on the ground? What is the optimal, course of events in your mind?
Yeah, no, I don't think we're looking for boots on the ground from the United States of America. I think we're looking for all of those countries that I listed off: Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, all of those in the area, Iraq even, who's looking to push Iran, who has a heavy influence there, out of their area, new prime minister there. And of course, the Iranian people, of which there are 92 million Iranian people, they need to walk the road that we have paved for them. We have paved a road for them. We have destroyed military supply lines, infrastructure, sunk a navy, downed an air force, destroyed countless military capabilities. Are there more? Yes, because they're a very, very large country. But have we paved a road for them that they need to go out there and walk? 100%. They need to walk that road. There was a point that I was going to make in there, but I forgot what it was. There was another point that I was going to make in there, but I forgot what it was. So.
No doubt we'll get back to it. What would you say to Americans right now who say this is not our war, that the Iran-US war, that the IRGC, yes, we know that they had blood on their hands on American soil with American lives, but what would you say to Americans who are saying this is not our problem and we need to just step away from it?
This is not a fight that America asked for, or that any American asked for, in my opinion. This is a fight that Iran has chosen every day. And I've used a couple of stats already. You could use other stats going to, October 7, going all the way back to, as I said before, the barracks, the Marine Corps barracks bombings in Beirut, and all points in between. But again, just in the last 30 months, over 350 attacks before Epic Fury ever began. That is Iran saying, United States of America, we are going to bring the fight to you every day. We are going to fire at your merchant ships. We are going to fire at your naval ships. We are going to drive boats into your naval ships. We're going to fly drones into your naval ships. We are going to take your U.S. service members, where we saw them outnumbered, go surround them with several Iranian ships, put them on their knees at gunpoint on the deck of their U.S. vessel. We are going to fly ballistic missiles into Tower 22 in Jordan and kill, Sergeant Rivers, Sergeant Sanders, Sergeant Moffett in that place. Again, all before Epic Fury ever began. What was going on was ignoring this, allowing it to be the status quo, and that is now being disruptive. I am an American. I'm an former American service member, and in no way, shape, or form am I ever going to let somebody hit me and allow that to go unresponded, whether that's me personally or whether that's my country.
Absolutely. And then we do have a follow-up question, which is, what does "we pave the way for our neighboring Arab countries to do the job in Iran" mean to you?
It means I believe that we've already paved the way, in part, and we're still paving the road. When I say paving the road, you had at the beginning of this year, Iranians step up in number, estimates of up to 40,000 Iranians rebelling against their government, which now their government is the IRGC. They were stepping up. Since we have gone in there, destroyed everything that we have destroyed, to include putting the Ayatollah 6 feet under, killing his generals, their military leadership, infrastructure, you name it. They have not gone out there and walked that road in the way that they walked that road at the beginning of the year. And in the same way, maybe to use this, to take it off of mainland Iran and put it in the Strait of Hormuz. Strait of Hormuz is, by everybody's definition, an international waterway. You have the coastline of Oman, you have the coastline of Iran, and they have their waters, but you have an international waterway there. What we need is not just the U.S. Navy ensuring freedom of navigation, but for an international waterway that is being threatened, there should be an international coalition of navies that are ensuring that freedom of navigation in the international waterway that is affecting everybody. But what you have is you have the United States of America that is, the only one essentially working to ensure that freedom of navigation. Old saying, freedom isn't free. Well, freedom of navigation isn't free in this circumstance either, but it's not international Navy, it's U.S. Navy.
Absolutely, sir. And looking at the reverberations on the GCC countries, we're seeing Iran hit U.S. allies in the region, some of whom have relations with Israel, have signed the Abraham Accords, some of whom have not. Do you believe the Abraham Accords are stronger or weaker since October 7th and the subsequent Iran war? And do you believe right now that the GCC countries are reacting in a way that is in America's interest and in terms of normalizing towards Israel, reinforcing American ties, or we're seeing some type of fracturing?
Don't take one statement of this and say it's a period and the end of the statement, right? I think the Abraham Accords are weaker in part since October 7th. The war in Gaza for all of those Gulf and Arab countries was not a high point for them, right? It is stronger, or this is a stronger input. That is a weak input towards the Abraham Accords. A positive input to the Abraham Accords has been the Iranian attacks on all of their neighbors, all of those Gulf countries, the support that those Gulf countries have received from Israel. That is a positive input on the Abraham Accords, and the recognition of the fact that Iran was lying to the face of every one of those countries, Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, every single one of them throughout the area, when they would go to Tehran, because they had normalized relations there, and Tehran would tell them, we would never attack your ports. We would never attack your ships. We would never close the Strait of Hormuz. We would never fire at your cities. We would never attack your people. We would never. And they realized the day after this conflict began, they were pre-planned targets, long-standing pre-planned targets, and that they were being lied to directly by Iran. You can't unring that bell. All of these Gulf states recognize that, and that is a positive input to the justness of Israel's war against Iran and all of their proxies.
Absolutely. And I would add that Council...
I'll give you one more question, then I got to go to work.
Okay. With that right now, is Saudi-Israeli normalization still realistic? I would point out that CSA polling found that 81% of Israelis support the Abraham Accords, 78% support normalization with Saudi. We saw this conversation happen this morning, and I'll go to the chat quickly, with contradictory reports that the new Saudi-U.S. nuclear deal may or may not be contingent on Saudis joining the Abraham Accords. Are we going to see the Saudi-Israeli normalization materialize?
I'm going to throw in a couple of cliches in this, right? Saying night is darkest before the light. That's a true statement, right? And I think we can all agree that if we just allowed the status quo to continue of what was in 2020 and 2018 and all the years before of just constant Iranian funding of Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, these proxies, ebb and flow of rocket attack and not rocket attack, bus bombings, cafe bombings, mall bombings, things like that. We could have just continued on the status quo, and that can be the status quo for the next 20 years. None of that changes without disruption. You have to actually disrupt that. October 7 became the catalyst for this ends once and for all, that disruption, for Israel specifically. I think we are at an inflection point, or coming to that inflection point, of having a greater opportunity than ever to have more positive relations, Abraham Accords, anything else across that region, because we're dealing with the real disruptions. Is dealing with the disruptions painful, difficult? In any game, in any match, in World Cup, in football and baseball, you can't fast forward to the ninth inning or the end of the match or the fourth quarter. You have to go through the whole fight to get to the actual winner at the end. And that's the difficult part. But that's the goal, is we're going through a fight that haven't decided to go through in all of these years prior. And I believe that at the end of that, you can get to the point where you have a Middle East that we haven't seen in however long, where, a Jew could potentially fly from Tel Aviv to Beirut to Damascus to wherever else. I think that you can actually get to that point because you're dealing with all of the disruptions that have just been allowed to stand. And when we deal with those things, as painful as it is, just like dealing with difficult conversations with our own kids, you ultimately do it to get to the better place. We're not doing this to be at a worse place in the end. We're dealing with the painful things to be at a better place in the end, because we won't allow the status quo to stand.
With that, America first, but not alone.
Jenny, Congressman, do you have time? Because there are a couple of questions in the chat.
I do not. They have to take me to go vote on things.
Okay.
So this is our last day of session before we get into what's known as the August break. And so I'll be, returning back home. And, so anyways, very busy is the point.
Thank you.
Squeeze a lot into today.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congressman.
So
thank you. We have a group of experts here who will take some of those questions that you can't. So
you all.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you for all you do. Thank you so much.
Sir.
Thank you, Congressman.
And best of luck today. Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your time and your expertise.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. So Jennifer, should I'll go ahead and introduce the panel.
Sure. And then can we do some Q&A, because we have more questions. We focused a lot on Iran and Saudi, which I think are quite timely, but I know that people want to unpack Syria and Lebanon, so we'd be more than happy to discuss our experts.
So should we, let's go ahead. I'll introduce the panel, and then you'll moderate that and can ask them those questions. How's that? Okay. So perfect. So this was fantastic. So I'm so thrilled he was able to join us. So we'll now move to the second part of the program, and we'll have a panel discussion that will allow us to explore these issues, answer the questions that the Congressman couldn't get to. So it's my pleasure to introduce our three distinguished panelists, a short bio on each. Dr. Joseph Olmert is a distinguished Middle East scholar, former peace negotiator, author, journalist, and public speaker, a retired professor of political science and Middle East studies at the University of South Carolina. Dr. Olmert has had a long and distinguished career in academia, government, and media. He previously served as director of Israel's government press office and as an advisor to former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir.
You are mute.
I'm mute?
Yes, because you're speaking. I'm sorry.
I'm mute?
Now, no. Now you're fine.
Okay. So, yeah, it wasn't showing as mute. So I don't know what happened there.
Now you're fine.
Okay. So throughout his academic career, Dr. Olmert taught at several leading institutions, including Cornell, York University in Toronto, City College of New York, American University in DC. Dr. Olmert resides in Columbia, South Carolina, with his wife, Diana. They have 3 daughters, and proud to say we've been good friends for many years now. Dr. Robert Rabil. Dr. Rabil is a professor of political science at Florida Atlantic University here in Palm Beach County, Florida, and a leading expert on Middle Eastern politics, political Islam, and U.S. foreign policy. A former Red Cross emergency official during Lebanon's civil war and manager of the U.S. State Department-funded Iraq Research and Documentation Project. He is the author of numerous books and articles on the Middle East and a frequent commentator in national and international media. In 2004, I had the privilege of serving with Professor Rabil as a scholar in residence at Oxford University through the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. And last, but certainly not least, is Dr. Iqbal Akhtar. Dr. Akhtar is Associate Professor of Religious Studies and Politics and International Relations at Florida International University in Miami, a specialist in Islamic studies, South Asian politics, and transnational Muslim communities. He received his PhD from the University of Edinburgh and has published widely on religion, history, and society in the Muslim world. At FIU, he teaches courses on Islam, international relations, political thought, and interfaith engagement. Each panelist will offer brief remarks, and Jennifer, you'll lead a discussion with the panel, followed by questions. And I now turn the program back to Jennifer.
Wonderful. Well, with everyone's permission, I'll allow each of the panelists to give a few remarks, and then we can dive right into Q&A. So, Stephen, in whatever order you'd like for the speaker.
So let's go in order of the list. So let's start with Dr. Olmert.
Thank you very much for inviting me. As usual, you know that I like this place. I think that I've contributed about 20 plus articles, you know, to the publications of the Institute, including some that proved to be predictions that proved to be correct. I think that in your institution, I predicted that Assad regime is not winning the civil war in Syria, as proved to be, and so on and so forth. But that's not about me. It's about you guys. You do a great job, and I appreciate that. Of course, the congressman is a war hero, and we love his work and also his support for Israel. And Jennifer is doing a great job. Louis is now at the University of Ariel, that I was a member of the board there for many years. When the university was established, Louis, with my mentor, the late Misha Arens, was the defense minister, you know. We basically were among the founders of the university. It was an old friend, Igal Cohen, or God, the late. And that's a great university, and it's good that you're there. Okay, I want to make some comments, and let's start with Iran. So let's start with the end. What's happening in the last 48 hours is 2 things that I would like to mention here as the basis for this remark. One is that when the Pentagon announces what they did overnight in Iran, the bombing there, they keep saying, we did everything that was supposed to prevent the Iranians from attacking the Straits of Hormuz. And here is the first point that I want to make about the situation in Iran. If the situation with Iran today, 13 months after the initial war, which started in June of 2025, let's not forget it, if what we do now is about opening the Straits of Hormuz, let me say something unpopular, the Iranians are winning and we are losing. And why? Because they force us to do what they want us to do rather than what we intended to do in the first place. And this is as it stands now. And I emphasize the word now because it can change. And if it will change, we'll see. But until now, the fact of the matter is that the Iranians managed to create a situation whereby the problem really is the Straits of Hormuz, rather than what was initially and should still be the main aims of what we do against Iran, which is to weaken the regime to the point of near collapse and then collapse, to prevent their involvement in regional terrorism, and I will come to that in a minute, and to stop their development of atomic energy weapons, and of course the ballistic missiles program. And then let's see something else that happened in the last 48 hours. The Houthis are doing what they are doing. What a surprise. Let me remind you that the US did come to an agreement with the Houthis that they would not do what they are doing now. This agreement excluded Israel, and yet the Houthis are doing what they are doing now as a proxy of Iran after 13 months of a war that we have conducted against Iran. Which is, my friends, to say that up to now, the goals of what should be the war with Iran have not been achieved. And for me to say it, it's not because I was initially or even now against achieving all these goals. On the contrary, because I am in favor of them. So that's one point that we have to bear in mind. And it was mentioned by the congressman about the 40,000 Iranians and all that. It was mentioned by him, and I don't want to debate. The congressman represents the right positions, but when he says that there were 370 attacks on Americans between June of 2025 and the second round of the war in Iran, it's because the first round ended prematurely, as you remember, by pressure put by President Trump on Israel to stop the war at a time when there were the first signs that the Iranian regime is showing signs of collapse. So I would like to remind us all this. Okay. Second point that I would like to make is a more general one about negotiating with a country like Iran. The problem is not that negotiating with them is forbidden as a matter of principle. I would even go and say something that will surprise some of you. I don't even mind negotiating with Hamas. The problem is, what do you want to achieve in these negotiations, and what do you read into the negotiations after you have already experienced them? And the fact of the matter is that we have achieved nothing in the negotiations with Iran as of 2015, when the initial nuclear deal was achieved through President Obama and all this. And the fact of the matter is that if something was not achieved for 12 years already or 11 years, why would it be achieved now? Unless we do something else. And the something else is what is missing that leads the Iranians still to resist us and to be on a comparison with the #1 power in the world. When the president says, if you attack this, we shall attack that, he plays to the ends of the Iranians because he creates a situation whereby they are on a par with the US. And that leads me to the third comment, which is, what's the impact of all this in the Middle East? The impact of all that in the Middle East is disappointment, frustration with the fact that the US mostly, but also with the help of Israel, have not been able to achieve the goals that were set to the campaign against Iran. And when we talk about Saudi Arabia, for give you an example, when we talk about Saudi Arabia, for example, will they or will they not join the Abraham Accords? We forget that they've already joined Turkey and Pakistan in creating an alternative axis which would satisfy their security concerns. And why do they do it? Because they are not happy with what is happening. They don't trust that what they want to see happening will be achieved. There's another point about the Abraham Accord, which is more about Israel, and that is the point that I'm going to make now. I don't want them to come and criticize what America is doing without leaving Israel aside. Israel is a partner here, and Israel deserves a lot of criticism. And when we talk about Saudi Arabia and, for example, the Abraham Accords, bear in mind that what they say, at least, is that they want an Israeli commitment about the two-state solution. That the current lunatic government, yes, lunatic government of Netanyahu with his crazy partners from the extreme right wing will never give to anyone. And Israel should learn once and for all that you cannot expect everybody, among particularly our friends, to do whatever we want them to do without us doing something that they want us to do. It is as simple as that. As simple as that. And just before coming to this program, I had a long chat with my sister-in-law. She's very much older than me even. And she was a soldier in the Israeli army in the 1950s. So you can imagine how old she is. And she got award for being a great soldier from the president of the state of Israel at that time, Yitzhak Ben Tzvi, who even remembers the name. And she writes to me now, so what's going on? How can it be that everybody is against Israel? There are reasons for that, and most of them having to do with anti-Semitism. This is Amira Alperin here, and she could tell you more about that. She's the expert. But one thing that we need to understand also when we talk about what's happening with Iran is that Israel has to do more to create the conditions that will make it a partner to what is happening in the Middle East. And my very last comment is because Robert Rabil is also here, and of course you expect something about Lebanon. I like the terms historic agreements and the Israeli-Lebanese agreement and all this. It is not historic at all. We already had an agreement with Lebanon in 1983 that was abrogated exactly a year later by the Lebanese. America stopped Israel from doing much more damage to Hezbollah again this round. And why do I mention that? Because if you want to make peace and if you want to have a dialogue, do it with those who are ready to do it. And in Lebanon, an interesting situation was created. The vast majority of Lebanese said, we want Hezbollah to be destroyed. And the ones that stopped Hezbollah from being totally destroyed were the Americans. How can it be? How can it be? And the reason for that doesn't matter anymore. I talk about the outcome, and the outcome is that this agreement with Lebanon will stay a word on paper without any significance so long as Hezbollah is still controlling the situation in Beirut itself and preventing anything happening other than just some changes and some 2-3 points in South Lebanon. All right, my friends, I think that I've said enough to provoke a discussion, but I would leave it to you to continue. Thank you very much.
And Robert?
Stephen, thank you. And thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. You know, Joseph is a very good friend of mine, and I always take what he has to say. And
now you're going to attack me, huh?
No, I'm not going to attack you. Listen, first, let me start with saying this, you know, and I will start with the chairman. And then when he said disruption, it has been a confrontation for so long. So because when you say disruptions, that's mean you are not going to have a strategy to do what you need to do vis-a-vis Iran so as to know where you stand vis-a-vis Iran and where Iran stands vis-a-vis with you. So mainly we have been really confronting Iran for quite some time, and I am for, and I was still, I'm still for confronting Iran. But then came the strategy, and this is where I got lost mainly when we launched mainly the war between us and Israel against Iran. Here, the strategy were different. And there is no, you know, questions that the strategy of Israel differed from the strategy of United States. Mainly, I think myself, you know, the president liked the strategic ambiguity. He likes to have option. From those options, you know, he can choose. This is what he likes, and he is the president. You know, he liked, for example, the option of regime change, the second option of change within the regime, and finally, you know, whether the people of Iran will go ahead and do the change themselves. Nothing of the sort happened, and this is where really we faced, you know, the dynamics changed of the war. And what do I mean the dynamic change of the war? Mainly, I look at my side and say, okay, what's happening now? Really, you have the Strait of Hormuz. Now it is a priority, but then you have, again, the nuclear file. I was myself a little bit surprised that when we did the Memorandum of Understanding, we did not include, you know, the program of ballistic missiles. Because myself, I think, and I thought about it for quite some time, I always thought that, you know, the Iranian would like to know mainly the know-how, how to build an Iranian nuclear weapon. They would like to reach that stage, but they will not build it until they have enough ballistic missiles and enough, I would say, you know, sophisticated, you know, ballistic missile. And why I say that, when I go to the Iran-Iraq war, and this is how I look at the mindset of the Iranian. One of the most important things that happened to them is that they did not have ballistic missiles, and Iraq, thanks to the coordinate that we gave them, to hit at Tehran and other cities, it was for them something that is so important for them to build that defense. So mainly the ballistic missiles, they are deterrent. And of course come the asymmetrical warfare, which includes, the drones. And the drones really are not very expensive. So this is how they went. Now the point is, now when I look now at what's happening with Iran and the region, I see some positive and I see some negative. The negative, broadly speaking, is that we have a problem at our hand. And I don't know, when I look in the near future, I don't know what kind of a regional order you are going to have. And this is where I agree with Joseph. Really listen. When I look, I say, okay, who is the most, who really benefited from this war? Did China benefit? I would say yes. Did Pakistan benefit and became an outside actor? Now it's an inside actor. Yes, it has now a defense alliance with Saudi Arabia. Turkey had a military base with Qatar, but now, I think that its military base in Qatar is going to get expanded, and now it has a broader alliance with Saudi Arabia. Now, on the other hand, you have Israel now, more rapprochement, and I would say more of an alliance with UAE. So here now, I will ask myself the question, okay, what about the American security role? And this is, I have a question mark. Why I have the question mark? I know that they still need us. We provide the umbrella of security, but underneath that umbrella of security, you have variables now. And those variables, you have to know where they are going to lead us. And from my understanding, from my perspective, I don't know where they are going to take us. This is something I put it, as I mentioned, I wouldn't say on the negative side, but a big question mark. Now, the other thing that I will speak about it regarding the Strait of the Hormuz. Somehow, yes, I am a political scientist, but I love history. I love history, since I was a kid, I love the stories, all kinds of stories. And I say to myself, what is the tradition of United States? Let's go back to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, as a matter of fact, went to war with the Barbary Strait. Why? Because they disrupted the navigation, free navigation. And if you look, as a matter of fact, at World War II, at World War I and World War II, part of that war for us was to make sure that all international waterways are open. So I agree with the chairman is that, it is, but what you are going to do about it? So myself, I think, whether with our allies or without our allies, we need to open those strait, period, for me, whether in Bab el-Mandeb or whether in Strait of Hormuz. And listen, the President Reagan did it in 1987, 1988 through the operations that he did. So this is something I would like to see. Now, I will go to the region, and since I spoke about mainly the dust hasn't settled in the Middle East, mainly in the Persian Gulf or the Arab Gulf countries. What about the Levant? The Levant, you have changes. You have significant changes. Look at Iraq. Iraq, I led a lot of research on Iraq. I dealt with the opposition. I know good number of them, and now they are in government. And I would say that today the Iraqi, they have taken a step in the right direction. Mainly now to say, listen, you have Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, and we have to go ahead and have a new, some kind of I would call this modus operandi, some kind of strategy where they should not dictate, and by extension, Iran dictate the politics of Iraq. That's a huge step, and I think that they are on the right path, and I hope that will deepen the relationship with United States. And of course, to take that challenge, it's a challenge, so this is Iraq. I will say it's a good, as a matter of fact, step in the right direction. I look at Syria. Syria, listen, yes, I have, as a student of terrorism and a student, and an author of radical Islam, I realized this guy gave me a headache. He gave me a vertigo. The way he turned around and from Salafi jihadi to become really a pragmatist. And almost every day I look at what he says and what he does. And I can tell you this, he does whatever United States is asking him to. So this is now a new relationship with Syria. But that new relationship came now again with certain things about the minorities, whether they are Alawi, Christian, and especially the Druze. We don't know what's going to happen with Swaida. Really, I listened to Hajri mainly recently, and he said he would like not the autonomy, he would like to secede, period. So you have a lot of questions. But on the other hand, I would look at United States policy towards Syria, and I say United States is pushing for the centralization of authority in Syria. They would like Syria to stay a unitary power, and they would like Syria to be a centralized authority, which I don't think it will now, for the time being, it will play well, it will be standing well regarding the minorities. But on the other hand now, you know, Syria has changed from an Iranian proxy. I wouldn't say it, you know, it's an American proxy, but I would say you have now a better relationship. The question for Israel now about Turkey. Turkey, you know, recently I was in Israel and we spoke about it, and I gave a lecture, you know, on Turkey. Turkey really has been smart all along. If I want to see who are the winners in that war, I would say China first and then Turkey second. And this is where, you know, this is gonna really kind of is gonna test Israel and the diplomacy of Israel. Israel has done good vis-a-vis, you know, the war effort, how it protect itself, but it did not match this through its, you know, political diplomacy, mainly achievements through diplomacy. This is something I agree with Joseph. Somehow it could be better. Now, this is a big challenge for Israel. Regarding Lebanon, let me tell you this. This is for the first time. This is where I disagree a little bit with Joseph when he said it's not historic. Now, I know about Israel, as a matter of fact. I served in the Red Cross on all fronts since I was a kid, since I was 14, 15 years old. I know the Israeli very well. You know, I studied, I was a fellow there, you know, at the Dayan Center, Truman Institute. And I did my dissertation there, you know, Embattled Neighbor, which was really a required reading for most intelligence agency in the United States. And I can tell you this, the Lebanese know Israel and Israel know Lebanon more than anybody. I can tell you this more than anybody. You know, whether, and I can tell you many people. Now, the point is what's happening. And what's so important is that Lebanon is going and negotiating with Israel without sponsorship, without an Iranian sponsorship, without a Syrian sponsorship. And this is by itself, it's a great achievement. Now, is it an uphill battle? I can tell you this is an uphill battle. You know, I am very, very much, you know, unhappy with Jumblat, Walid Jumblat. I'm unhappy, you know, with others. But of course, you know, I feel that the president of Lebanon and the prime minister of Lebanon, they have, you know, to walk this path. They have to walk this march, you know, or it's going to be a farm. And I always say it, I don't mince my words myself. It's a farm. You are going to have a country with institution. You follow that path. Lebanon has 3 borders. It has the Mediterranean, it has Syria, and it has Israel. And Lebanon will not be stable if it doesn't have peace with Israel and Syria at the same time. So I am for peace, and I'm hoping, you know, for, you know, movement in that direction, sponsorship being sponsored by United States. Now, regarding now my last thing, what I would say, I say really the Middle East now is at the cusp of a new regional order. That regional order has not been, the impression of it has not been really kind of determined. We have had some, I would say, some victories, some changes, radical changes in the Middle East, which I am happy to see, you know, and we have certain things we are waiting to see what's going to happen. I am worried about Iran and about the future of the region, where Iran remains, or Iran will secure a prominent role in the region. And this is what's happening with the Gulf. So I would like to see the Arab Gulf country changing their policy and forget this self-control. You cannot self-control yourself by pursuing this policy, shying away from confronting Iran. On the other hand, the United States, again, I am worried about its position throughout the Middle East, and given our strategic rivalry with China, this is something it needs to be discussed. But at this point, I have, as I mentioned to you, I have a question mark. And on the other hand, I feel that the Middle East needed that change. needed that change. So whether it is overall positive or negative, it was a needed change and a welcome change, and especially to clip the wings of Iranian proxy and to put the Middle East on a new path. This new path, I think that between Israel, United States, and other countries, especially the Abraham Accord, could play a role. Now, the extent to which it remains to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have Professor Iqbal up next.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer, Stephen, Luis, everyone for inviting me to come. I'm gonna I don't know if I have permission to share. I don't know if you can give me the permission to share my
I
screen.
think I can.
Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm going to make you a host, but
Okay.
okay.
It's a lot of power for you, Iqbal. Be very careful.
Okay. There
Oh,
you go.
okay. All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, that is. Well, hopefully I'll turn it back to you guys when I'm done. Let's see how to do this. I'm sorry, I don't use this that often.
While we're sorting out the technical
Yeah.
piece of this, I just want to make a note. Please share all the questions in the chat or raise the hand raise function when we move to Q&A. Just some housekeeping items so we can make sure a lot of the questions are answered. I know there are some redundancies in what people are messaging me, so I want to make sure that we tackle all the areas of the world that are being discussed.
Jennifer, you're probably a pro at combining questions that are similar.
Yeah, my job right now, in the spirit of time, I want to make sure that we aggregate everything together. I know there's a lot of evolving events going on, and we're watching the president's Truth Social posts as we speak. So things are happening in real time.
But did he change his opinion again in the last few minutes? Yep.
Above my pay grade.
No, watching his truth.
Yeah.
Iqbal,
Okay.
are you ready?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure how to share the screen. I just need to share my screen. Anyway, I'll just do it with
to the function where it says share on your toolbar.
Yeah, see, there's a lot of it's just showing me like either application windows or browser tabs.
So click on the tab or the application that would be using that.
It's PowerPoint, but I'm not seeing the PowerPoint tab coming up.
Oh, Zoom does something funky. You have to hit there should be a tab in the top when you do share.
Yeah.
It says screen versus.
Yeah.
And then you put it on the screen.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay. All right, perfect. Okay, so can you all see this?
It looks like it's coming up.
Yeah, I see. It says.
All right, wonderful.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah,
perfect.
Okay, great.
We made
All
it.
right. Well, yeah, thank you. And I'll share these slides with you guys afterwards. So I am a professor of religious studies and politics and international relations at FIU. And so I wanted to kind of just talk. I do a lot more work on my work focuses on covenantal pluralism, interfaith dialogue, and trying to essentially bring about kind of, part of the promise of peace in the Middle East, the Abraham Accords, but from theological and cultural sort of perspective. So I think that's something that it's important to understand. I think a lot of the work that we do and then a lot of the analysis about what's going on tends to be about power, thinking in military terms. But I think it's important to understand that there's a whole cultural and religious component to the conflict, and being able to suss that out, I think is very important for long-term peace. So why is it important? One, I think there's an important component with regards to thinking about what authority, secular versus sort of religious authority, the frame that, particularly for Iran, using and understanding this as a sacred struggle, the idea of resistance and martyrdom as a religious duty and not just bargaining chips, and then also thinking about how sacred geography is used within sort of the conflict itself, right? But it's important. So I'm not saying that, it's only just a religious sort of conflict. Clearly it's not, right? It's political and it has material dimensions to it. But understanding, how do we get to a point of first understanding what is happening, and then how do we get to that? So the first thing that's important to understand is the idea of authority, right? So in religious authority, and particularly within Shia Islam, you have religious leaders, right? So the Ayatollahs who are considered to be marja'iyya, right? So 12 Shia believe that the Imam, the 12th Imam is an occultation. And so you have religious leaders that speak on his behalf that help to guide the community as teachers to enjoin the good and forbid what's evil. And so historically, because Shia have been a minority, that has taken the form of political quietism. And there are many different versions of Shiism, from Ismailism to the Ithna Ashri, which becomes the dominant with the Safavid Empire. But what is the big innovation, I think, within the Iranian context is the idea of vilayat faqih. And so I think that's a really important development that takes place that really doesn't have a precedent in history. So the idea was that the Shia would be waiting, well, for the majority, for the 12 or Shia, they're waiting for the Imam to come back at the end of time as a messianic figure. And so in the meantime, these religious leaders are supposed to guide the community, but they're not able to actually speak on behalf of the Imam. And that's a really important sort of
Uh-oh. Can you hear us?
Iqbal, I think that your audio
Can't hear you.
went quiet. You've been muted if it's not capacity.
You've been you're muted.
okay.
Oh, you're back. You're back.
You can hear me? Okay. All right,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think for some reason my internet's not as stable. So what happens is that there's a shift that takes place with Khomeini, and the shift essentially is the merging of sort of Shia thought with essentially I would say certain strands of sort of Marxist socialism, and this idea then that the Ayatollahs actually can take political power. It can speak on behalf of the Imam. And so it really changes the dynamics of sort of the separation that historically was there between religion and sort of state power. And what ends up happening then is that you have essentially a schism in terms of sort of the orientation of Shiism. So you have in Najaf in Iraq with Ayatollah Sistani that sort of doesn't agree with this idea and says that, look, religion and politics kind of have to be separated for the good of not just politics, but religion itself, right? And we see that in the positive role that Sistani played in the democratization of Iraq. And so I think that is a very important sort of component, is that sort of the type of religious authority that's being used in Iran is also contested. And so it's not a monolith in terms of thinking about the larger sort of Shi'i world and what is the orientation for that Shi'i struggle. I think one of the things that's also important for us to also understand is that you have this idea of Karbala, which is an event that takes place in 680, where the family of the Prophet fights against the Umayyad dynasty and is martyred, and is something that's commemorated every year. What ends up happening, I think, in a larger sort of meta perspective, is that colonization, the last 200 years, starting with 1798, Napoleon sort of entering Egypt, is two fundamentally different eras of Islamic history, I think. Colonization fundamentally shifts the nature and understanding of Islam. And I think it goes from what I would argue is kind of a medieval or a pre-modern perspective in which Islam had ideas of what flourishing looked like, what positive engagement with other cultures and civilizations, what creativity meant, what innovation meant, and it really then shifts. And I think this Iranian government is an example of essentially what ends up happening, which is really the idea of Islam as resistance. And so the religion itself is simply, and that's why I think this conflict is so much more difficult, because if you're looking for flourishing, that's a much higher bar and much more complex institutionally, ideologically, than simply resistance. In survival and resistance, if that's simply the aim. That's a much, much lower threshold and much easier to disrupt in, sort of flourishing. And so I think this is kind of the larger meta sort of idea. And so what ends up happening then is the idea of martyrdom becomes a state project, and it becomes sort of a very important part of sort of the theology of people that are being killed. And I think a good example of that is the Iran-Iraq War, and how that prefigures all of the conflicts that sort of come after that. So that's there. So I think that's also why then this idea of just trying to, I think it really makes it very, very difficult. The idea of some sort of resolution that's not essentially regime change, because ultimately, if resistance and survival is the only mechanism, there's no idea of sort of a larger flourishing, which is the ideal outcome of the Abraham Accords, right? Sort of an integration that the congressman was talking about of Israel into the larger Middle East, and some sort of, sort of intellectual, cultural, economic revival of the Middle East outside of conflict. It becomes very, very difficult. So in thinking about sort of the sacred geography, of course, you have the covenantal claim of Zionism, and then you have the resistance claim of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Again, contesting and grounding it in ideas of sort of sacred land, which is very, very important. So what are the larger sort of cultural registers that we have here? One is the idea of memory, and sort of how things are remembered. The idea of Ashura and communal mourning is something that is used by the Iranian government to deal with the current conflict. And so this current conflict then is not just a conflict of politics or of money. It becomes something that's not just existential for the regime, but becomes drawn into sacred time as well. And so this becomes a reenactment of Ashura on a daily basis for Iranians. And it creates a larger cosmological context for understanding what the conflict is about. And it's not simply a resolution. The second thing that's important, I think, to understand, and not just this conflict, but also the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, is the idea of what honor means, and sort of what does the honor-based culture and honor mean in terms of being able to resolve things, and the larger question also of the idea of dignity, and sort of what does dignity mean in terms of peace building and sort of the resolution of conflicts as a way of trying to end conflict, and then also how and where authority lies within sort of religious and societies that organize themselves very differently with regards to sort of their civilizational understandings of themselves. So I think one of the larger things for Iran as well is a recovery. And for those of you who kind of study a little bit of Chinese history, you know that one of the animating ideas, there are two really animating ideas, I think, in contemporary political thought in China. One is, of course, the fall of the Soviet Union and making sure that what happened to that communist regime doesn't happen here within China. But the second that really animates the engagement in the frame by which the Chinese understand the West is this idea of the century of humiliation, of sort of the century of Western domination, and this idea that they were subjugated by the West, and being able to recover civilizational pride. And I think that's another very, very important part of also is the Islamic world. The last 200 years, the idea of Islamic decline and being able to recover that dignity really also is a very strong animating feature, and it really informs anti-Westernism that exists in a lot of sort of the Islamic world. And the question, that I'll leave us all with is, can a piece written in the language of interest hold what its peoples hold sacred? And I think that's a really important question to think about, this idea of sacrality within the context of what's happening right now. So it's just another dimension that I wanted to, sort of inject into the conversation. And I really appreciate the opportunity to present. And thank you. And I'll turn over, Stephen, I'll give you back the hosting rights. Thank you.
Oh,
Well, Jennifer.
thank you.
Oh, Jennifer,
Iqbal.
okay.
Wonderful.
Well, I get the hosting rights, but
You
Jennifer
get
is
the
the
hosting
moderator.
rights. I don't want to take any accountability
Okay, all
for
right,
the
got it.
technology piece above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, first off, thank you for your expertise and your remarks. I do want to open it up to the chat, but before I get there was one conversation we have not touched upon, which is the two-state solution dead or alive? CSA, Council for Secure America, the organization I run, just released another wave of polling of Israeli voters conducted in June of this year. And currently 64% reject and oppose the two-state solution, with only 20% supporting it. With that in mind, is the two-state solution a viable solution for peace right now with Israel and its Palestinian neighbors? And understanding the framework, as we talked about with the chairman of the Abraham Accords, is the two-state solution the way that we see Saudi normalization and other normalization in the Arab and Muslim world, or is that a dead end at this point? Welcome your thoughts.
Jennifer, may I burst into in an Israeli way, I'll be the first to answer you, but first I need to say that I was immensely impressed with Professor Iqbal. And, this is something that we don't hear enough about, the cultural, religious, traditional legacy aspects of everything. And I was fascinated by everything that he said. Whether I agree or not with everything, that's not the issue. The issue is that we need to hear that. And thank you so much, Professor Iqbal. Thank you so much. Now,
Yes, I agree.
What do you think could have happened in Israel after October 7th? The debate in Israel today, as opposed to what people think, is not between right and left. The left is defeated, even though the Democratic Party, as they call it now, the Democrats, might get more seats than usual. So they get 10 or 12 out of 120. So what? I mean, they used to be almost 70 in the beginning of the state. The debate really is about other issues, but when it comes to the Palestinian issue, the debate is no more about a two-state solution or not. It's about the role of settlers, how they behave. It's about the seeming hooliganic, and it is, behavior of some of them as opposed to what it should be. It's all kinds of aspects of the situation. It is accepted as a given one within the framework of the current status quo. Now, so if you talk about two-state solution, I would say to you the following. Look, it cannot be abandoned as a policy goal by any Israeli government. And of course, it was by the Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich government, but this is not going to be the government after the elections in October. I can guarantee you that, at least I hope so very much. The question really is how to do it. And how to do it has always been the problem, The devil is in the details. Gaza, therefore, should be and could be the test case. Because you talk about what? You talk about solution in Gaza, a particular territory out of the entire territory in dispute. And what is happening in Gaza right now is not good. It doesn't bode well. It doesn't bode well because Hamas is still there. And there is not going to be any solution. 1 state, 2 state, 3 state, 4 states. If Hamas is around, as much as it will not be in Lebanon, if Hezbollah is still strongly around. So without getting into details, I would just say, you want to start dealing with the question of two-state solution, do something in Gaza which will be against those who don't want any solution, rather than allowing them to still exist there.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from our panelists on this? All right, we will pivot.
Jennifer, sorry, I want to say something if I can. Listen, the way I look at Israel and especially the Jews in the world, it's not now an issue only dealing with the Israelis, really. And you have to take a look at it. As a matter of fact, American and European and Jews, as a matter of fact, throughout the world, they have to have, or, they should have some kind of a view of what's going on in Israel. It doesn't mean that you are encroaching on Israel's sovereignty. But mainly what you have now in the world has changed. Anti-Semitism is not anti-Zionism. The spark, the spike of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, it's really now, it's not confined to a party, it's not confined to an area, it's not confined to a geographic location. As a matter of fact, you have threat now on Jewish life and on Jewish, livelihood. For example, for those who are living in Great Britain, and I believe Amira is there, she can tell you what's happening. I believe, I still remember very well when I was with Stephen at Oxford in 2024, and there was a paper that was distributed, you remember, Stephen? And it put, as a matter of fact, we don't want Islamophobe and we don't want Zionist. So Zionist now is same like Islamophobe and I don't know, and fascist. And so mainly the question is, and this is where the Israelis and the Jewish nation, they have to decide, because from my perspective now, really, I cannot really kind of sever the relationship between the two, because I think now it's more important and more bonded together, Jews and Israel. And this is my point. This is the only point I would like to make.
Excellent. Question for Iqbal from the chat. Can you expand on more of the resistance part? We hear about it in many contexts. And then a follow-up to that is, if dignity and honor hurt throughout the history of colonialism turned into resistance, are we talking about a permanent revolt? Are you suggesting there's no way to solve the conflicts through negotiation? So, and I'm going to expand on this right now. We're looking at dismantling Hezbollah, Hamas. These are ideological fights. How do you unpack all of this and change the next generation beyond just education? How do you de-radicalize many of these populations that have grown up with the spirit of hate that's, part of their everyday ethos?
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I mean, so I think what you do is you do have models that have tried to work on de-radicalization. So the Saudi Arabia has been putting quite a bit of effort into it. Interesting, like one of I think the leading places where they're dealing with de-radicalization is Singapore. They've been doing like some really fascinating work in terms of trying to figure out how do you de-radicalize individuals and populations. So okay, so they did two things. One is that there is within the Shia world, there is this alternative idea of pluralism that Ayatollah Sistani sort of inhabits. So I think that even within the Shia world, the reason why the Iranian perspective and the Iranian idea is like they've also been exporting their ideology for the last since the 1979 revolution, and they have really what's really interesting is like you go to Pakistan and the the Pakistani Shia are much more pro-Iranian than actually a lot of the Iranian regime than a lot of actual Iranians are. So they've really exported their ideology to many different parts of the world. Which is a challenge. I think there are other, so within the Shia world, I think Iraq and Najaf has an alternative perspective on Shiism. And then within the Sunni world, I think that, the UAE, Indonesia, there are these places that are trying to push for a pluralistic understanding of Islam that's not a zero-sum game, where it's not just resistance. So I think that there are models in the Islamic world. I think it's a very challenging to say, but just looking at the geopolitics, unless the Iranian regime is really defeated, I think that the money, the arms, and the ideology is going to continue. And so the question is like, how do you either collapse the regime or make the ideology bankrupt? And one of the things that we've seen, there's a really good scholar, his name is Olivier Roy. He's in he's in Paris, and he's written some very, very good books, very, very incisive, French philosophical understanding of what's going on. And there's another book that's just come out recently from Oxford by Faisal Devji. And really what they're arguing is that as a whole, political Islam so Arab nationalism lost its capacity to inspire or for people to buy into the ideology with the 67 war, right? And 73. And so political Islam also, with the defeat of ISIS, we're seeing kind of the last vestiges of political Islam that's being, so in the Sunni world, it's basically lost. Like there's very few Sunni societies that are really going hardcore political Islam. The last sort of resistance against that is the Iranian regime and the Shia political version of it. And unless that loses energy and money, I think it will unfortunately continue for a bit longer. But I think that there are indigenous models, there are nation states that provide alternative perspective, and I think being able to harness that for shared prosperity, I think is possible. Yeah.
So I want to follow up on that with a tactical question
Sure.
about Syria, which might be relevant to this group.
Right.
Obviously, President al-Shara, al-Golani, as he likes to fancy himself, was a self-professed jihadist for many years, especially by the United States standpoint. Now he is a president with a fabulous tailor. Without getting into his sartorial needs, he's looking very presidential by all accounts. And knowing all of that, and knowing that since sanctions are no longer the primary tool, how do you believe the US, Israel, and others should handle al-Shara at this point? Does he become normalized? Iqbal, does he become de-radicalized? Given recent situations with the Druze and otherwise, he hasn't exactly, rid himself of violent tendencies. And I would add, from a polling standpoint, the RCSA polling found that there was a broad support of President al-Shara, and in that broad support, 53% of Syrians supported a security arrangement with Israel. Again, where does that fall in the conversation? So happy, Iqbal, if we want to start with you about the de-radicalization,
Sure.
if possible, of al-Shara, and then we'll take it to our other two panelists.
Yeah, I mean, I think he is presenting a very interesting iteration of political Islam, because I think what um, he wants to do is he wants to buy political legitimacy. So in the previous generation of political Islamists, they've been kind of all or nothing. So it's been the ISIS, the Taliban. These is kind of like the ideologies that have and it's been basically zero compromise. And so either, like in the case of ISIS, essentially you're kind of destroyed, or you become a pariah state like Afghanistan has become, right? And so he doesn't want either of those. And yet I think so I think he's a very interesting experiment, I think, at least in terms of thinking about how can you normalize political Islam. I think it's possible. I think he also he cannot, because the like you were saying, in a way, the population, because of the warfare, has become so radicalized on one side. He cannot seem too accommodating. At the other end, what is the alternative at this point, right? So I think what President Trump has done is very good in terms of trying to stabilize the situation. I mean, is he an ideal leader? Of course not. I think, he represents, from my perspective, one stage in the development from the extremism of ISIS into something that eventually, hopefully, in a generation or two, can become something more pluralistic and more stable. But the thing is, it's so hard to, and this is just kind of the work that I do in terms of pluralism and interfaith engagement. You can have these remarkable societies that are multicultural, multi-religious, and within a generation, like in Bosnia and other places, it can be destroyed. And it takes like 2 or 3 generations to get back to it with sustained effort. So I think just what the Assad regime did, with the brutality of it all. But I think in a way that brutality also opens the way for normalization with Israel as well.
So,
But we tend to forget the elephant in the room about Syria that I'm surprised you don't mention. It's Turkey. This,
Yeah.
of course, look, Ashara is doing exactly what the Turkish textbook is telling him to do. I mean, he is creating a situation whereby he stabilizes himself, and at the same time, alongside it and parallel to this, he is working with the Turks in order to bring them in as his guarantor. And so long as the current regime in Turkey is what it is, this is bad news. By the way, not just to Israel, but also the Syrians themselves, who would not like to see that the Iranian role in Syria is replaced by the Turkish role in Syria. And my last point about that is that, with all due respect to all the reports about how nice he is, and Trump says that he's good looking, he's handsome, God knows what, read and see the report from Syria itself about what happens with the minorities. And let me tell you something. If I was, this is not a prediction, just my thought, if I was in an insurance company, I would not issue life policy for Ashara. He is in danger. The situation that was created in the Alawi area and in the Druze area and in the Kurdish area is not going to disappear without response. And this is the Syrian historic lesson. And unfortunately, it's going to happen again.
Question follow-up for you, sir. If you look right now, should the Israelis be engaging in any direct talks with al-Shara? Should they be dealing with Erdogan again as his primary benefactor? How should Israel be responding to al-Shara right now in this moment?
No, of course, we need to talk to him. We need to look. I agree with Robert Rabil. I mean, we really don't have any big debate, even though it might be a good one to have one because he's so brilliant. I'm not against talks with Turkey as well, but in fact, I would like to see this happening. I would like to see talks with Syria, but as opposed to the expectation that were, I would say that the best we can achieve with Syria now is a reinstitution of the agreement from 1974, a security agreement with some security guarantees. But all this can be done. I'm ending here. Only if Israel still stays in South Syria, not leaving. Because the trump card that we have about these talks is the Israeli support to the Druze.
With that, Robert, just to follow up, you were talking about the Jumblat and Lebanon. President Trump indicated perhaps al-Shara should take the Israeli role of sort of cleaning up the mess with Hezbollah. Obviously, there are a lot of disagreements with that on many fronts, given his jihadi background. What is your take on that? And how do you think right now, given that Syria and Lebanon are two autonomous countries, but have been sort of swallowed together under the Iranian regime with the proxies, and things have changed, how would you address all of this?
All right, I'm going to address this, and I have a few comments. As a matter of fact, President Trump is not going to ask, Shara to go in. And even if he asks Shara to go in, he's not going to go in. From the United States perspective, I think myself, the United States would like Shara mainly. And of course, from Lebanon perspective, is that to regulate the border. The most important thing that al-Shara is going to do and hopefully will do is that to make sure that no weapons going to go into Hezbollah. And this is something we saw it happening, as a matter of fact, a few days ago, where you have, drones and all kind of things were smuggled into a truck for shipping oil. So mainly when the president speak about Shara, this is what, and I really, you have to understand something about President Trump. Mainly the way his psychology, sometimes he says certain things for other people to hear. Sometimes he says certain things to show how strong he is and how he can be the achiever, the most important achiever in the room. Now, what I think he does think about Shara is that, for him now, he's a sample, he's a paradigm. You know what a paradigm? Look at this guy and look what I achieved in Syria. This is how I think. As a matter of fact, Lebanon and Syria now, you have the prime minister went there. They spoke together. They have a committee. Of course, it's not like the committees that took place between Syria and Lebanon under Assad. And you have certain limits now, and they understand it. So this is, I don't think Shara is going to go in. Regarding Jumblat is a pan-Arabist, has been always a pan-Arabist. And he doesn't feel like Israel from his perspective. Similar to his father, also at a certain point, as a matter of fact, if you go back to the Shuf War in the 1980s, he switched and he spoke with the Israeli, and the Israeli helped him, mainly against the Lebanese forces. But mainly he is someone, really first, as a sectarian leader, he likes to take care of his community, which is its number one. Second, he is a pan-Arabist, and a pan-Arabist from his perspective, he doesn't think the way I am pursuing him and I'm following him, he doesn't think that Israel today is serious about peace. And he doesn't think that Saudi Arabia is going to make peace, which I absolutely disagree with him. So that's his position. Now, let me just touch something on Iqbal said and on Joseph said. When you look at political Islam, I fully agree with Iqbal, but also there's something with political Islam happening that you have to make a distinction between political Islam that we see in the Arab world and the rest, and political Islam in Turkey. The political Islam in Turkey, if you look at Erdogan, yes, he is an Islamist, but from his perspective, as a matter of fact, he is an Islamist who is ruling a secular country. What do I mean by that? Whereas political Islam, other Islamists, they speak about, against the background of Islam, as a more of from a scriptural, perspective. He speak, from the script on personal status, but also from a civilizational role, Muslim civilizational role from, a political perspective. And this has to be taken in perspective. Why? Because I think this is what al-Shara is moving ahead and would like to do. He is an Islamist, But of course, on personal status law, we are going to see more Islamist perspective from the scripture, mainly from Sharia. But again, from politics, you are going to see some pragmatism. Regarding Israel, and this is something I would say regarding mainly the sacred and not sacred. Remember one thing, this is extremely important, and this is why I believe that certain negotiation might lead to something under pressure, of course, with Iran. Why? In the 1980s, you remember, Khomeini had more than one chance to stop the war. He kept the war. And Khomeini was behind the one who really justified and legitimized suicide bombing. Really, he is the one. But then at the end, when he saw that he's not going to be achieving any victory against Iran, he said, listen, I'm going to drink from that chalice of poison. So there is a certain point, even with Islamists, hardcore Islamists, they can reach a position and that will say, listen, this is it. Because wherever they are, they still would like to be, alive and survive. They like the other people, their follower to die. But when it comes to them and their political, survival, they would like to survive. Regarding Israel again, and this is something, and I will stop. Israel from the Islamist perspective, Hezbollah, there is something in Hezbollah. Hezbollah doesn't look, at Lebanese territory as sacrosanct. Lebanese looks at Lebanese territory as from a nationalist perspective. These are very important from a national perspective. What does he look at Israel? They did not, the most Islamists, if not all Islamists, they did not yet being able to fathom Israel as an independent state in Muslim land. Mainly, they look at Israel as waqf, as an endowment. And this is something really has been reified in the discourse from Khomeini, Khamenei, and Hezbollah is one. If you look, for example, at the first statement, from the open letter, from the open letter of Hezbollah, the one that established Hezbollah, it's a duty, as a matter of fact, it says to obliterate Israel. So here again, as a matter of fact, this is how they look at Israel, and this is how it affects the modus operandi and how you are going to deal with them. But I do believe that Hezbollah, same like Khomeini in 1988 when he mentioned, when he is put into a corner, he's going to say, okay, I'm going to go along with what's happening. This is my perspective myself. Thank you.
Thank you all. We have a question from Amira in the chat. For all the panelists, will Saudi Arabia respect the conditions that President Trump is demanding regarding Israel? And to clarify, for those who were not listening earlier, this is the precondition to signing the pact right now that would force or push Saudi Arabia to sign the Abraham Accords with Israel. So what is everyone's take on that? And that's about nuclear enrichment.
Well, he changed his position, Trump, about that because the agreement was already signed with Saudi Arabia. So yesterday, it's an official announcement from the US, the agreement was signed. So what is he saying today is what, that the agreement was not signed or that it do not be put into effect? I mean, it's not clear, but look, why won't we ask the different question, my dear Amira friend? I mean, the Saudis would not sign anything without an Israeli commitment about Palestinian state. And this is exactly where the problem is, that the Israelis are unable to do it so long as the current government is in place. And let's be honest about that. It's not that I justify what the Saudis want or not. I'm just telling you what their position is. And they put themselves in such a situation, the Saudis, that they are not going to give up on that. And if I have to say to myself, who is going to blink first? The US signing this agreement with Saudi Arabia and going along with it, or the Saudis joining the Abraham Accords? I would say that the Americans will blink first, not the Saudis.
Robert.
Okay, listen, Jennifer, that was the way I think. Forget trust. When it comes to politics, I say forget trust. Put trust, on the other side of the ledger, period. What I like verification. And this is what I would like to see. United States supervising, seeing, overseeing with everybody. With everybody, as a matter of fact. Really, this is the way I feel about it. It happened. But listen, history showed us, and history has told us, yes, at certain time, under certain circumstances, even your own allies and your friend, they could pursue things that could be detrimental to you. So myself, I focus on verification. And I hope United States, especially, with the Arab world, and other, to have a strong verification process.
Trust but verify, they say. Iqbal, any comments on this before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I wanted to say was in terms of thinking about like there's a religious dimension to I don't know, there seems to be a lot of interest in Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords, and I think there's a major issue I think there from a religious sort of perspective, right? So I think um, the current government, right, in Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud, is not, they base their legitimacy on being the custodians of the two holy mosques, right? So Mecca and Medina. But when you actually look at the Quran and you look at sort of the tradition, they're not the holders, right? They're not sort of entrusted by God to take care of that. And so there's a issue generally of sort of the legitimacy based on Islam. And so I think so long as because it's actually the group that's the tribe that's supposed to control it is the Quraysh, right? Bani Hashim, the family of the Prophet, and the Sauds are not from that family of the Prophet, which is it has its own sort of theology and authority sort of within Islam. So my perspective is that Saudis, because they already on very shaky religious legitimacy, and you have all of the economic and sort of and ideological challenges that are taking place right now, it's highly unlikely that Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords anytime soon, and particularly in a situation where you have global Muslim opinion that is very, very much against Israel. I really feel that it's going to come much later when you actually have other major powers. So the strategy, if you want to get Saudi Arabia on board, would actually be try to get other stronger Muslim countries, interestingly enough, like Turkey, on board, or Indonesia, or some of the larger sort of Muslim countries, and then you would have a bandwagoning effect in Saudi Arabia. But Saudi Arabia will not take the lead, I think, in during the Abraham Accords. That's my perspective. Yeah.
And Iqbal, just as a follow-up to that, do you think that Indonesia would sign an agreement with Israel prior to Saudi?
I think they would, but you have to give them time. Right now, the Gaza war has been so devastating on the Muslim psyche, and I think it's just politically it would not be possible right now. But I think if you give it some time, Indonesia's pragmatism and their ideology, particularly the state ideology of Pancasila, I think really, and just kind of their intellectual trajectory, and sort of the type of pragmatism that's part of sort of Indonesian contemporary Islam, dealing with the Hindu heritage of their past, and the way that they're managing pluralism and sort of their thousands 17,000 islands. They are a really good alternative. And then you have the Nahdlatul Ulama, and sort of these organizations are much, much more open. And I think the way that you would crouch it is to position it as the covenantal relationship, which I think is very important. So the Quran talks about Bani Israel, the children of Israel, right? Using that terminology and that framing, I think it's quite possible. Yeah.
And this is a question for everyone. When we think about the Abraham Accords in its original form, we think about peace through prosperity. The economic opportunities that were being afforded to those who signed on to normalize with Israel, tourism, geopolitics, but more importantly, economic trade and commercial opportunities that wouldn't otherwise be afforded to them. Do you think right now the United States remains, and I personally believe it does, and CSA does as well, the linchpin behind the Abraham Accords? Do you think somebody else can take on that mantle? And does that require right now sort of American strength overseas where they're leading from that front?
Jennifer,
So, start, Joseph, with you.
let's be perfectly honest about that. Yes, the US can do that theoretically and practically. They can do many things that, because this is America, we know that. The problem really is that when you look at what's happening today, and yet something that was not mentioned until now, why are the Iranians attack all those Arab countries of the Gulf? They attack them for all kinds of reasons. Among the reasons is to weaken the Abraham Accords. Because what they show by these attacks is you have the Abraham Accord, see what happens to you. Nothing good is happening to you. Nobody comes to your help. And when the Israelis stupidly leak that they support UAE, the UAE, of course, denies it, even though we know what's happening. So my point really is that it all comes back to the elephant in the room in that case. There are two elephants in the room, Iran and Turkey. If Iran is not going to change and the regime will be in place, the Abraham Accords have no future other than particular bilateral situations between Israel and UAE, or maybe Bahrain also and other countries, but not what was supposed to be. The same goes to Turkey, because the Turks are with Qatar, the Turks are with Saudi Arabia. But another point here is, again, that we tend to forget that economic benefits have never been enough of an incentive to make peace in the Middle East, other maybe than the Israeli-Egyptian peace by Sadat. And when the congressman, if you recall, in his great expose in the beginning, he talked about, I don't understand the Iranians. They can get so much more by making peace. It is a complete negation of everything that Iqbal said so brilliantly to us about the cultural, religious, historic, traditional legacy and all that. We can think to the other side whatever we want. Let them say to themselves and to us what they really think, and let us believe it.
Thank you. Iqbal, and then we'll have Robert.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to leave just in a minute. I have little kids to take care of. But yeah, I think that I agree. I think it's the U.S. is going to be an important player, but it really isn't. It is not the economics. I mean, we have to. It's helpful, and I think that people want to be, prosperous. But this idea of honor and dignity, I think, are very, very important, and then the entire religious dimension to it. So it can't be dismissed. And I think so. Being able first to resolve that, then I think you create openings for the possibility. And I think just again, part of what I'm trying to do and develop. This is a very hard thing to say, but the Muslim experience with Jews and Judaism in the medieval period, of course, is Jews as essentially second-class citizens. And so thinking about equality with Jews, and then how do you reckon with theologically, philosophically with Jewish power, I think is a much larger sort of theological work that has to be done sort of within the Islamic world, which I think is possible. And I think that that's being done already to an extent. But that's also something that I would really encourage, thinking about and working with, religious scholars who are open to it. And there's some organizations like Sharaka and other ones that are kind of doing this kind of work behind the scenes, which I think is very, very important. So you have to lay a lot of this foundation so that when the actual normalization happens, you have the intellectual, the spiritual infrastructure in place in order to make it successful.
Excellent. Robert, final thoughts.
All right. United States role is always needed, really, because you need someone in the room who will bring together, all this opinion, all the concern, all the interest. Now, when it comes to the economy, I think myself is very important. It's the sweetener. But also, I look back and I look at every piece that Israel has done, and every country has its own, as a matter of fact, background against which it went and promoted peace. With Egypt, it was security returning the land. With Jordan, you have always communication and correspondence that go back, even before the state of Israel was established. With the UAE, as a matter of fact, UAE today, it's mainly looking into a future, which is different than how Saudi Arabia look at the future. Mainly it's looking at the future. It's a digital future. It's an economic future. It's a small country, but it would like to play or to have a share, of its influence in the world. So this is why Israel is important. Saudi Arabia, I think myself, and this is where I wish Iqbal was there. Saudi Arabia, he mentions that, well, the Saudi, they are not from the tribe, mainly the Hashemi tribe. Here you have to make a difference between the hadith of the Prophet and the Quran of the Prophet. I think this is hadith more than merely hadith is saying, and all the hadith is not really authenticated, by all the Muslim scholar. Now, looking in the future, I think that Saudi Arabia will make peace merely according to when it's ready. But something with Saudi Arabia, they really would like to see some form of a settlement for the Palestinian issue. But I would say they don't care if it is half the West Bank, quarter of the West Bank, this or that. They would like to say mainly this issue has been somehow resolved, because indeed they look at themselves as the custodian of the two holy mosques. And as I mentioned, In political Islam, you have to make a big difference here. And this is why, yes, theology is important. But again, now, other than theology, what you have now is this new form of political Islam, which I call the quietist movement, mainly the quietist, which we are seeing now in Europe, we are seeing now everywhere. They believe that Islam should have a role, but their role mainly is not violent. And of course, I'm not gonna go through the discourse, but their involvement, as a matter of fact, especially in the West, is growing. So yes, the Abraham Accord are good. I feel myself, under certain circumstances, I would like to see the other countries. And another thing, mainly, I did not mention Kuwait. Why Kuwait? And this is what to prove my point. Kuwait, as a matter of fact, really was saved by United States. Kuwait was the first country to go and impose a tax, mainly a fee on all Palestinians. You have the great number of them who worked in Kuwait so as to give to the PLO. And the PLO was the first one to side with Saddam Hussein against the Kuwaiti government. So ask yourself now the question, why Kuwait still does not have a good relationship with Israel? And I'll tell you why. Because Kuwait it has a system that is completely different than Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. Kuwait has a parliamentary system, and in that parliamentary system, you have tribes, and you have Islamist party / Muslim Brotherhood. They are against, doing a peace treaty with Israel for the time being. And I thank you, Jennifer.
What a cliffhanger. I feel like we need to have a round 2 to just unpack the Kuwait conversation.
I've made note of that. We're going to have a round 2.
Excellent.
At another time.
Before I turn it over to Luis, I want to thank our panelists for really an extraordinary conversation. Robust, the candor was phenomenal, and their expertise should really be commended. So thank you to all of you for being here. Luis, I'll turn it over to you, but it was a privilege being here, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, thank you so much to the panelists, and of course, I think it has been a wonderful program. I think there are a lot of issues and a lot of questions. Yes, you brought the issue of Kuwait. Saudi Arabia is still a question mark, but we got some good perspective. Turkey is also, we don't know what's going to happen. Yes, we need to continue, but I remind everyone, those who want to submit us articles, we welcome them, okay? By the way, we are not only about foreign policy, we are also about domestic policy, right? Legal issues, social issues, economic issues. Anybody who would like to submit an article or has any idea for a program, you can contact either me or Steven, okay? In any event, I'll be more than happy to put our emails or, in the chat. Feel free to do it. We are trying to expand this, the center. And of course, I repeat what Steve said in the beginning. If somebody actually wants to donate to the center, there is a button at the bottom of the website where you can click and donate. Okay, thank you so much. Steve, I turn over to you.
You've said it all, but let me just add, for those who are still here and those who will watch later, that Joseph Olmert and Robert Rabil have been involved with the center for as great as they are throughout the world. And all the wonderful work they do, they still find time to write for us, appear here, and both have been advisors to us. So if you do, anyone who chooses to write for us will be in great company. And also, I do want to thank. I want to thank Jennifer, who did double duty.
It was terrific.
The first half and the second half. This is like a
great job. We should have started with him. Stephen, we should have started with Jennifer.
No. I'm merely here in a personal capacity, enjoying the expertise.
That's your opinion. I'm entitled to my opinion.
Well, I appreciate that, guys, and invite you to check out our work the Council for Secure America. We have a number of...
you might get my email address from this gentleman that running this center in
And if you don't know, I don't mean to embarrass her, but if you don't know Amira Halpern,
Oh, yeah, Mira,
she's
no,
on the
I
world
met her.
stage. She's an incredible person in the world of media, studying anti-Semitism, and just a wonderful person to follow.
And you know
And
what?
Very
I need to say something. I was surprised that Joel Levine did not ask a question. I mean, I was expecting Joel to ask me a question.
Luis must have gotten to him ahead of
Discussion
time.
we had last time, but he did not.
I mean, there are so many questions to ask that I can think of. I mean, regardless, Joel, but more sophisticated questions. But obviously, we have your details, and we can, if it's possible, maybe after we'll digest. Yeah. Get back.
And also, Dr. Aileen Levy from Montreal has been very active with ISGAP, and just a wonderful person, an activist in her own right up in Canada.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
It was
you
a
for
great
coming.
discussion, really. And I really look forward to more. It's great. We have to talk about Kuwait. That's a big one. And then we have to talk about also dimitude, which was just brought up and kind of passed over, but it's a key issue. And it's both a cultural, it's an obstacle. So
Iqbal mentioned that in passing in the end.
Yeah.
Well, what university are you in Montreal? Concordia?
I'm actually a medical doctor. I'm not one of you academic types.
No, because I was attacked in Concordia way back, and I thought,
I'm a McGill grad.
Well, you can do something about it retroactively, yeah.
I'm McGill University, which has a prominent medical school.
Yeah. And I do want to say also,
good to see you again.
I just have to say this, that Betsy Kramer, who's online, is a Republican, active Republican activist in Georgia, and has been a friend for at least now 40 years. So thank you, Betsy, for coming. And Terry Fine, wonderful political scientist from University of Central Florida, lives down in South Florida now. I've known Terry for many, many years. She used to be president of the Florida Political Science Association. And then, and Mike, there's so many people here. I'm going to forget someone, but Beth Ann, who's here, Beth Ann Kessler. Yeah, Beth Ann Kessler, my cousin from Philadelphia, is like a sister to me, and Joel's been involved with us for a long, long time. And Tony Grogan at one point was second in command at Newsmax. He is so politically connected; it's just incredible. And he lives here in Palm Beach County. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you. I want to say something that we are non-partisan, right? We are not Democrats or Republicans. Okay, we
have Joel and we have Tony Grogan and we have Joel, two opposite ends of the spectrum.
And Terry Fine.
Terry Fine, yeah. Right. Anyway, so I don't want to dig myself a hole.
Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.